Year 23 CE. You're in your bedroom. It's the middle of the night. You were sleeping. Now you're being dragged from your bed by strangers. Your husband isn't stopping them. He's standing in the doorway, watching. His face shows nothing. The men are pulling you through your own house. Neighbors are gathering in the street. Someone's shouting. The word cuts through the darkness. Adultera. Adulteress. You're not. You haven't. But the accusation has been made, and under Roman law, that's all that matters. They're taking you to a magistrate. Right now, in your night clothes, with no chance to speak, to defend yourself, to understand what's happening. You're 26 years old. You've been married for 8 years. You've never been unfaithful. But 3 days ago, you smiled at a merchant in the forum. Your husband saw. He interpreted. He decided. And now you're learning what Roman law does to women accused of adultery. Because under the Lex Julia de Adulteriis, passed by Augustus in 18 BCE, adultery wasn't just grounds for divorce. It was a criminal offense, prosecuted by the state, punishable by exile, property confiscation, and social death. Any citizen could accuse you. Your husband could weaponize suspicion. False accusations were common. Defenses were nearly impossible. And the penalties destroyed everything you were. Welcome to the Lex Julia de Adulteriis, the law that turned every married woman in Rome into a potential criminal, where accusations required no proof, where trials were public spectacles, where conviction meant the complete annihilation of your life. And it was perfectly legal. For over 400 years. 2 weeks ago, you had a normal life. You were Valeria Maxima, wife of Publius alias Marcellus, a wine importer. No children yet after 8 years of marriage, which worried you both. You managed his household. You maintained the family shrine. You supervised the weaving. You did everything correctly. Everything by custom. Everything the way a Roman wife should. But your marriage had been cold for years. Your husband traveled constantly. He had a mistress everyone knew about. When he was home, he barely spoke to you. You'd learned to live with loneliness, to find small pleasures, conversations with neighbors, shopping in the forum, managing the household slaves. 3 days ago, you bought wine from a merchant you'd known for years. He made a joke. You laughed. Your husband happened to be passing. He saw you laughing with another man. That night, he was silent. The next day, he consulted with his father. The day after that, men came to your house. And now you're standing before a magistrate in the middle of the night while your husband formally accuses you of adultery under the Lex Julia de Adulteriis. You haven't committed adultery, but under this law, that doesn't matter as much as you think it should, because the law wasn't designed to punish actual adultery. It was designed to control women, to remind every wife in Rome that her reputation, her property, her entire existence could be destroyed at any moment. All it took was an accusation, and you've just been accused. This wasn't a unique horror. This was Roman law functioning exactly as designed. In 18 BCE, Augustus passed the Lex Julia de Adulteriis Coercendis, the Julian law concerning the punishment of adultery. It was part of his moral reform program, designed to strengthen marriage, encourage childbearing, restore traditional Roman values. But what it actually did was criminalize married women's sexuality and give men legal weapons to destroy their wives. Here's how it worked. Adultery was redefined as a criminal offense against the state, not just a private family matter. Any married woman who had sexual relations with any man other than her husband was guilty. The penalty was severe: exile to an island, confiscation of half her dowry and 1/3 of her property, permanent legal disability. She couldn't remarry a Roman citizen, couldn't inherit property, couldn't testify in court. Social death followed legal death. But here's what made the law truly terrifying. Who could prosecute? Initially, the husband had 60 days to bring charges. If he didn't, his wife's father had another 60 days. If neither prosecuted, any citizen could file charges. Any citizen, your neighbor, your husband's business rival, someone who wanted your property, someone who just didn't like you. Anyone could accuse you of adultery and force you to trial. The burden of proof was theoretically on the accuser, but in practice, defending yourself was nearly impossible. Because what counted as evidence? Circumstantial observations, witness testimony about your behavior, your reputation, how you dressed, where you went, who you spoke to, being alone with a man who wasn't your husband, laughing too freely, drawing male attention. All of these could be presented as evidence of adultery. You didn't have to actually commit adultery. You just had to behave in ways that could be interpreted as leading to adultery. Between 18 BCE and 476 CE, thousands of Roman women were prosecuted under this law. We don't have precise numbers, but legal texts reference constant cases, commentary on procedure, precedents, appeals. The law was used frequently enough that an entire body of jurisprudence developed around it. Some women were guilty, many were not. But guilt or innocence mattered less than the law's real purpose: to terrorize every married woman in Rome into perfect submission. If this story grips you, drop a like and subscribe. It takes a second and helps us pull more voices out of the silence. Weird Roman history doesn't sanitize the past. We show you what actually happened, because the truth matters, even when it's uncomfortable. The legal procedure was documented with characteristic Roman precision. Every step designed for maximum humiliation. Every stage calculated to break the accused woman before conviction even occurred. Stage 1. The accusation. The accuser filed a formal charge with a magistrate. The charge had to name the accused woman, the alleged partner, the approximate time and place. But the standard of specificity was low. Within the last 6 months, at or near her residence with a man identified as a client of her household was sufficient. The magistrate reviewed the charge. If it met basic requirements, he accepted it and issued a summons. The accused woman was now formally charged with a crime against the state. Ulpian, writing in the 3rd century CE, explains the procedure in his commentary preserved in Justinian's Digest. Once accusation is properly filed, the accused must appear before the quaestor to answer charges. Failure to appear results in judgment by default. The accused is forbidden from appearing veiled and must present herself for public examination. Think about what that means. You couldn't even cover your face. You had to stand before male judges and a public audience while they discussed your sexual behavior in explicit detail. Stage 2. The preliminary hearing. The magistrate would hear initial arguments. The accuser presented evidence. You presented defense. But the standards were asymmetrical. The accuser needed only circumstantial evidence. You needed to prove negative, to prove you hadn't done something. How do you prove you weren't alone with a man when the accusation says you were? You need witnesses who saw you somewhere else at that exact time, but you don't know what exact time the accusation specifies. The accuser can be vague. You must be specific. If the magistrate found sufficient grounds, he referred the case to trial. Most cases were referred, because rejecting an accusation meant implying the accuser had lied, and false accusation carried penalties. Magistrates preferred to let trials sort it out. Stage 3. The public trial. Adultery cases were heard in special courts called quaestiones. Public proceedings. Anyone could attend. The trials were entertainment. People came to watch respectable women be destroyed. The accuser presented witnesses, men who claimed to have seen you alone with another man, seen you behaving improperly, heard you say inappropriate things. Your slaves could be tortured to extract testimony. Roman law permitted slave torture in adultery cases because the testimony was considered crucial. Your household slaves knew your movements, your private conversations, your visitors. Under torture, they'd say whatever the questioners wanted to hear. You could present witnesses in your defense. But who would testify for an accused adulteress? Your reputation was already destroyed by the accusation. Associating with you was dangerous. Most potential witnesses stayed away. The trial focused obsessively on your behavior, not just whether you committed adultery, whether you created situations where adultery could occur. Did you go out without proper supervision? Did you speak to men in public? Did you dress in ways that attracted attention? Did you visit the baths, attend dinners, receive male guests in your home? All of this was relevant because the law wasn't just about punishing adultery, it was about enforcing female modesty, controlling women's movements, restricting their social interactions. Every aspect of your life was examined, judged, used as evidence of moral corruption. Stage 4. The verdict and sentencing. If convicted, the penalties were severe and permanent. Exile to an island. You were assigned to a specific location and forbidden from leaving. Soldiers would escort you there within days. Confiscation of property. Half your dowry went to the imperial treasury. 1/3 of your remaining property was seized. What little remained was held in trust. You couldn't control it. Legal disabilities. You couldn't marry a Roman citizen, couldn't inherit property, couldn't testify in court, couldn't bring legal actions. You became a non-person under law. Social death. Your name was erased from family records. Your children couldn't acknowledge you. Your former friends couldn't associate with you. You disappeared from Roman society as if you'd never existed. Valerius Maximus records these procedures approvingly. He describes convicted adulteresses as examples of justice, women who betrayed their marriages and received appropriate punishment. He never questions whether they were actually guilty. Guilt was assumed once the accusation led to trial. The whole process from accusation to exile could take as little as 2 months. 2 months from suspicion to complete destruction, with almost no effective defense. With public humiliation at every stage. Modern psychologists have a term for what this does to human beings: anticipatory trauma, when the process of accusation and trial becomes its own form of torture. When you're destroyed before the verdict even comes, when everyone watches your humiliation and does nothing. But Rome called it moral reform, called it protecting marriage, called it necessary law enforcement. So why didn't anyone stop it? Why didn't families protect accused women? Why didn't society question a law that terrorized half the population? The answer is that men benefited enormously from the system. Let's start with husbands. They gained an ultimate weapon against their wives. Suspicion of adultery could be used to threaten, control, and ultimately destroy a wife who displeased them. Don't want to divorce her formally and return her dowry? Accuse her of adultery. Get the state to confiscate her property and exile her. You keep everything. Don't like her behavior but can't prove she's done anything wrong. The adultery law didn't require proof, just accusation and circumstantial evidence. Did she embarrass you socially? Fail to produce children? Inherit money you wanted? Question your authority. The law gave you a solution. Pliny the Younger's letters reference this dynamic without condemning it. He mentions men who used adultery accusations strategically to rid themselves of unwanted wives, to seize property, to punish women for minor offenses unrelated to actual infidelity. He presents this as unfortunate but understandable, never as abuse of law. The wife's father faced an impossible situation. If he defended his daughter, he appeared to condone adultery. But if he didn't defend her, he abandoned her to destruction. Most fathers chose abandonment because defending an accused adulteress meant social contamination. It suggested you raised a daughter without morals. Better to distance yourself, to declare publicly that you supported the law, that if she was guilty, she deserved punishment, even if you privately believed she was innocent. The wife's family would often negotiate quietly, offer the accuser money to withdraw charges, arrange exile somewhere comfortable rather than a harsh island, try to minimize damage, but they rarely challenged the accusation directly. The risks were too high. And what about you, the accused woman? What could you do? Legally, you had the right to defend yourself at trial. In practice, that defense was nearly impossible. You needed witnesses willing to testify for an accused adulteress. You needed evidence proving you weren't where the accusation claimed. You needed to demonstrate perfect modest behavior throughout your entire marriage. Any lapse could be used against you. Hired an attorney. Roman law permitted it, but few skilled advocates would represent accused adulteresses. The cases were nearly unwinnable. Association with you damaged their reputations. Most women defended themselves, untrained in law, unfamiliar with procedure, facing experienced prosecutors and hostile judges. Could you flee? Where? The law applied throughout the empire, and fleeing proved guilt in most people's minds. If you weren't guilty, why run? Could you appeal to family connections? If your family was powerful enough, they might pressure the accuser to withdraw, but that required significant influence. And even powerful families often chose to abandon daughters rather than fight accusations publicly. The system had an answer for everything. Claim the witnesses are lying. They have no reason to lie, and you have every reason to. Claim your husband is vengeful. You must have given him cause for vengeance. Claim the accusation is false. That's what every guilty woman claims. Claim you were never alone with another man. Your slaves testified otherwise under torture, which makes their testimony reliable. So women were convicted, whether guilty or innocent, because guilt or innocence was never the point. The point was demonstrating that male authority over women was absolute, that a woman's reputation could be destroyed instantly, that wives lived at the pleasure of their husbands, that one accusation could erase everything you were. That's what kept women compliant, not just the law itself. The knowledge that the law existed, that at any moment, for any reason, you could be accused, that you had no real defense, that your life hung by a thread controlled by men. We know all this because Romans documented everything. Legal texts explain the Lex Julia in exhaustive detail. Ulpian wrote extensively on adultery law. His commentary fills pages of Justinian's Digest. Procedures for accusation, standards of evidence, penalties for conviction, appeals, processes, all documented as if discussing property disputes, because that's partly what it was, dispute over ownership of women's bodies and property. Papinian, another jurist, contributed case analyses, real trials, how judges decided difficult cases, what evidence proved conclusive, what defenses failed. Reading these cases is chilling. Women destroyed over the thinnest evidence, convictions based on testimony extracted through torture, defenses dismissed because accused women had once attended a public event without proper supervision. Literary sources reveal how the law functioned socially. Juvenal's satires reference adultery accusations constantly. He mocks women who face trial. He never questions the system. Tacitus, in his annals, records several high-profile cases. Aristocratic women accused by political enemies using adultery charges to destroy powerful families. He presents these as political tragedies, never as indictments of the law itself. Suetonius documents emperors who manipulated the law. Tiberius used adultery accusations to exile women from families he wanted to weaken. Claudius prosecuted his own wife Messalina under the law. The trial was a farce. She was executed within hours. These weren't aberrations. They were the law functioning as designed. We even have physical evidence. In 1987, archaeologists excavating on Pandateria, an island used for exiling adulteresses, found remains of residential compounds. Small houses where wealthy convicted women lived, inscriptions on walls. One reads, 15 years here for a crime I did not commit. My husband wanted my inheritance. The judges believed him. Another, my children do not know I exist. They were told I died. I died to them the day I was accused. These inscriptions survived 2,000 years. The women who carved them are nameless, but their words remain. And we have tombstones, some for women who died in exile, died far from home, innocent but condemned. Faithful wife, false accusation, true punishment. My husband lied. The law believed him. I died alone. The stones tell stories the legal texts try to sanitize. Some women tried to fight back. Their resistance was documented as failures and warnings. In 2 BCE, Augustus's own daughter Julia was accused of adultery, multiple partners, public scandals, behavior unbecoming of the emperor's daughter. Augustus himself prosecuted her under the law he'd created. She defended herself vigorously, argued that her husband knew about her relationships, that aristocratic marriages were different, that she'd done nothing wrong by the standards of her class. Augustus was unmoved. He exiled her to Pandateria, the same island where common women were sent. She lived there for 5 years before being moved to a slightly less harsh location. She died in exile 20 years later. Never pardoned, never allowed home. Her own father destroyed her, using the law he'd created to control other women. The message was clear. Not even the emperor's daughter was safe. Some wealthy women hired the best legal advocates available, mounted sophisticated defenses, challenged witness testimony, produced counter-witnesses, exposed inconsistencies in accusations. Occasionally, these defenses succeeded. We have records of acquittals, but they were rare, and they required enormous resources. Most women couldn't afford top advocates, couldn't produce witnesses, couldn't challenge the system effectively. Some women chose suicide rather than face trial and exile. Tacitus records multiple cases. Women who killed themselves when accusations were filed. They saw no path to acquittal, no way to survive the humiliation. So they chose death on their own terms. Their families often supported this choice. A dead wife was less embarrassing than a convicted adulteress. Suicide was presented as proof of guilt in legal discussions. Innocent women fight. Guilty women kill themselves. This logic trapped women completely. Fight and lose, or die and confirm guilt posthumously. Some women accepted exile but tried to maintain contact with children and family. They'd write letters, send messages, beg for visits. Most families refused. Association with the convicted adulteress brought contamination. Children were told their mothers had died. Families erased them from records. They lived and died in exile, forgotten. The closest Rome came to reform was under later Christian emperors. Constantine modified the law in 326 CE. He restricted who could file accusations, limited evidence standards slightly, reduced penalties in some cases, but the fundamental law remained. Women could still be accused, still faced trial, still were exiled if convicted. The modifications made the law slightly less brutal, but it still operated as a weapon against women for another 150 years. For the average Roman woman, nothing fundamental changed. Not for 400 years. The law persisted until the Western Empire fell. And in the Eastern Empire, modified versions continued even longer. So, when did it end? And why don't history books emphasize this? The Lex Julia was gradually dismantled in the 5th and 6th centuries as Christian emperors reformed Roman law. Justinian's legal reforms in the 530s eliminated many provisions, created new standards for evidence, required actual proof of adultery, not just circumstantial suspicion, removed the provision allowing any citizen to prosecute, reduced penalties, eliminated permanent exile in most cases. But the erasure of this history began almost immediately. Christian historians were embarrassed by pagan Rome's treatment of women. They emphasized the reforms, presented Christianity as liberating women from legal terrorism. They didn't mention that Christian law still punished adultery harshly, still controlled women's sexuality, still allowed husbands enormous power over wives, just with different justifications. Medieval scholars who studied Roman law focused on property aspects, dowry regulations, inheritance rules. They treated adultery law as a footnote, interesting legal technicality, not systematic oppression. They didn't discuss the accusations as weapons, the public trials as spectacles, the exile system as state-sponsored terror. Modern textbooks mention the Lex Julia briefly, usually in sections on Augustan moral reforms. They note Augustus tried to strengthen marriage. They mention adultery was criminalized. They rarely explain how the law actually functioned. They don't discuss that any citizen could accuse any woman, that trials were public humiliations, that convictions required almost no real evidence, that women were destroyed by the thousands. Why? Because it complicates our view of Augustus. He's the emperor who brought peace, who patronized Virgil and Horace, who created the Roman Golden Age. Acknowledging that he also created a legal framework that terrorized every married woman in Rome complicates that legacy. And because it reveals how law can be weaponized against vulnerable populations, how criminal justice can become social control, how protecting morality can mean destroying the innocent. That's uncomfortable, easier to skip it, to present the law as well-intentioned even if occasionally misused. But the evidence exists. Legal texts, case records, letters, inscriptions, tombstones, all documenting exactly what this law did to women whose only crime was being female in a society that needed to control them. The evidence is there. We just choose not to emphasize it, because emphasizing it means confronting how civilization used criminal law to terrorize half its population. So why does this story matter 2,000 years later? Because it teaches us something terrifying about how societies weaponize criminal justice against vulnerable groups. Rome didn't think the Lex Julia was oppressive. Romans thought it was moral reform, essential for preserving marriage, critical for maintaining social order. The law was presented as protecting families, as encouraging virtue, as punishing genuine wrongdoing. And Rome wasn't entirely wrong about adultery causing problems. Broken marriages did harm families. Children were affected. Property disputes arose. But the solution was to create a system where any woman could be accused by anyone, where defenses were nearly impossible, where penalties destroyed lives, where terror kept women compliant. The lesson isn't that Rome was uniquely evil. The lesson is that criminal justice systems can be designed to control populations rather than punish actual crimes. That laws protecting morality often target the vulnerable. That when enforcement is selective and accusations are easy but defenses are hard, justice becomes oppression. The patterns are still here, different forms, different contexts, but the same dynamics. Laws that criminalize behavior by specific groups, systems where accusations alone destroy reputations, proceedings where defending yourself is nearly impossible, legal frameworks that claim to protect morality while terrorizing the vulnerable. We've learned to make it subtler, to add due process protections that sound good but function poorly, to create standards that appear neutral but enforce inequality. But the mechanism is the same. Criminalize behavior. Make accusations easy. Make defenses impossible. Watch the targeted group learn to comply through fear. Hannah Arendt wrote about how ordinary people participate in evil through bureaucratic systems. The Lex Julia is a perfect example. The magistrates were just processing accusations according to law. The judges were just weighing evidence according to standards. The witnesses were just answering questions honestly. The families were just protecting themselves from social contamination. Everyone had a role, everyone followed procedures, and thousands of women were destroyed. Not because they were guilty, because the system was designed to destroy them. And it continued for 400 years. Because systems built on terror don't fall because they're unjust. They fall when those in power decide to change them, when external pressure forces reform, when the vulnerable finally gain enough leverage to demand better. The woman from the beginning of this story, Valeria Maxima, she was real. We don't know what happened to her after she was dragged from her bed that night, whether she was convicted or acquitted, whether she died in exile or survived somehow, whether her husband regretted the accusation or celebrated his victory. Her name appears in no record, no trial transcript, no tombstone. She vanished into history like thousands of other women accused under the Lex Julia de Adulteriis. But she existed. She was pulled from her bed by strangers. She heard herself called adulteress in the street. She stood trial for a crime she didn't commit. She learned that accusation was enough to destroy everything. She endured what history books sanitized. This is weird Roman history. We don't sanitize the past. We show you what actually happened, because remembering is the only tribute we can still offer. If this story reached you, drop a like and subscribe. Next time, we're revealing what happened to Vestal virgins who broke their vows, the underground chamber, the 3 days of food and water, the live burial ritual Rome used to execute its holiest women, the accusations as political weapons, the trials that convicted the innocent. The past isn't dead. It's waiting in the dark, waiting for someone to remember.